Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Krause, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. But let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have another spectacular guest. She is a Washington University in St. Louis School of Law graduate and currently works as the president and founder of the Legal Accountability Project. She's held past positions as an associate attorney in family law and as a law clerk at the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. Excited to have her on the podcast today, Mrs. Aliza Shatzman. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today?
Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast, and ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
Doing well, enjoying the DC heat.
Oh, I am as well. It's not as hot in New York, but I love the sun. I soak it in every single morning. It's my favorite thing in the world. You always need that vitamin D. But Aliza, before we get started, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm the president and founder of the Legal Accountability Project. We are a nonprofit aimed at ensuring that judicial law clerks, so new attorneys who work for judges, have positive clerkship experiences while extending support and resources to those who don't. That's not what I set out to do when I graduated from Williams College in 2013, where I was a poli-sci and psych major and a golfer. And I took a couple of years off, went to law school. We'll talk about that. Had a variety of harrowing experiences that led me to launch a nonprofit to correct injustices I personally experienced as a law student and a law clerk.
Well, beautiful. I can't wait. I can already tell you're a raw person. You got that honesty, and I can't wait to hear it all. So let's go back all the way back. You were at Williams College. You graduated majoring in political science and psychology, and you had a couple experiences in between that. You actually had 4 whole years before you even got into a law school classroom. But something I saw, which was in big letters on your LinkedIn profiles, the first thing I saw, that you had a very, very interesting experience as an intern at Planned Parenthood that really seemed to shape your whole perspective, and I'm assuming led you to start your own nonprofit. So let's start there. Let's talk about that experience. And then you also had a ton of other experience that I thought was really interesting. I saw the name drop here is Senator, you worked for Senator Elizabeth Warren, who I know who she is because she's on my TV sometimes. So that was probably a very good experience. But let's talk about first the Planned Parenthood experience. Explain what you were doing there and what that experience was like.
Yeah, and I should say I took 3 years between college and law school. I was a transfer for law school, which we'll talk about. Yeah. So at Williams, I went to Williams thinking I wanted to be like a pediatrician, like my mom. Screwed up first year bio 1 and 2, bombed them both. And I was like, fuck this, I'll go to law school. So I realized I wanted to do reproductive rights litigation. My parents, raised me to be very, activisty, get involved with a lot of advocacy on issues that I care about. You mentioned the LinkedIn banner on my LinkedIn profile, which is some quote. I think I said that I always had a strong sense of moral outrage, particularly on injustices affecting women. That's a quote from one of the first podcast interviews I did a couple of years ago. But yeah, I spent one of my summers as an intern at Planned Parenthood in Philadelphia, where I'm from and where I'll probably move back to someday. I was doing on the ground kind of community health fairs, so providing information about resources, condoms, health fairs, stuff like that, in like very underprivileged inner city communities, talking to a lot of young women who already had 1, 2, sometimes 3 kids. We were also assigned to a couple of pro-choice state reps campaigns in Pennsylvania. It was a tough place to be pro-choice at that time. It's better now. So I was knocking doors, canvassing, making phone calls, which was fun. I love the on-the-ground campaign stuff. And I was really galvanized by the personal stories I heard by some of these young women, and really realizing the effect that Planned Parenthood and access to contraception and abortion and, reproductive family planning services could have on their lives. And so that's what I did that summer. And then I spent my next summer at the National Women's Law Center doing more advocacy, national focus, legislative stuff. But that's kind of what launched me into my career aspirations as a reproductive rights litigator. So that's what I wanted to do when I got to law school.
So prior to going to law school, like you said,
Yep.
you were at Planned Parenthood. That was actually in college. But then
Yep.
after you got out, right before you got out, you also worked for Senator Kristen Gillibrand, she's New York, right?
Kirsten Gillibrand is one of my favorite humans. Yes,
I
that
know-
was
I know
honor
a
and a
lot-
privilege.
I know a lot of people who have actually interned for her. They always say very nice things about her. She's a very nice woman. I've never met her before. But I want to ask about sort of those legislative intern experiences. And obviously, what I have to ask is, were you still always planning on going to law school, even though you took 3 years prior to doing it? And I guess my question should really be, why did you take all that time before going into law school?
Yeah, great questions. Yes, I was always planning to attend law school. I was always planning to take 2 or 3 years. I wanted to know the type of law I wanted to practice. I wanted to be certain in my why for attending law school. I did not want to treat it as a second undergrad. I mean, people do go K through JD. It's not something I'd recommend. You don't have the right study habits. You don't have the right mindset. If you come into law school with some work experience, you know how to study, how to be in the real world, kind of the law you want to practice. So definitely recommend taking some time off. I graduated from Williams knowing that I wanted to work on the Hill. So I did some legislative internships as an undergrad, including in Kirsten Gillibrand's office. And then after that, I interned in Senator Warren's office before accepting a job on the House side as a staff assistant. And Congress is a really fun place to intern. It's a really fun place to work. I was definitely like a congressional groupie. Like I knew who all the House members and senators were. And it's funny because in my daily work now, I work with a lot of judges, and I've been very critical of a phrase I used to use, deifying judges, or like putting them on a pedestal. And it's interesting because I think back to there was definitely a time when I used to deify members of Congress, and it's interesting to reflect on that. But a really fun place to work, something I'd recommend everybody do for a summer or semester. So, yeah.
Now, what do you mean by deifying judges or politicians?
And it's one of my board members does not like me using that phrase, so he wants me to use a different phrase, putting judges on a pedestal. So judges are the most powerful members of the legal profession, but not me, but others have really treated them as if they can do no wrong. And I mean, federal judges are exempt from Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They are literally legally above the laws they enforce and interpret. And they've gotten a free pass whenever it comes to, legislation that will hold them accountable, efforts to make their hiring more transparent, make their chambers more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And it's really pervasive, starting on law school campuses, the ways in which we kind of treat judges as if they can do no wrong. And judges are just humans, and they're just employers running a small work environment with all the inherent fallibilities that entails. And we need to be honest about that.
Interesting, very interesting. I'd never heard that word before, so I just had to ask. I was very, very interested. But moving on to your first year of law school in 2017 at Washington University in St. Louis School of Law.
Well, I would correct you, not to correct the host, but
No,
I
no,
was
please correct me.
I transferred to WashU. I was a transfer from UNC, which is where I spent my first year, 2016 to 2017.
So UNC, starting at UNC
Oh
first
boy.
in 2016. I
Yeah,
love
UNC is gonna hate this podcast.
listen, UNC, please don't come after me. But
Uh,
I always love
so
asking.
is WashU. WashU will also hate this podcast.
All right, that's all right. That's
Yeah.
okay. If
Yeah.
I lose one
Okay.
or two schools, it's all right. There's many, many other schools out there. But I always love talking about the first year of law school. Some people hate it, some people love it. How was it for you?
And I knew you were going to ask this question because I am an enthusiastic listener of your podcast.
Oh,
I truly hated it. Sorry, UNC. I mean, not that sorry. UNC was my safety school. I did not want to go there. I stayed on the wait list for several places I really wanted to go, including WashU. Through the start of the semester, I would have like uprooted myself and gotten on a friggin' plane after classes started. I was really unhappy. It was a poor fit. Some people love it. For some people, it's fine, but I was just deeply unhappy. And I went and knew that I knew that I wanted to transfer. I knew that I was going to transfer, and I am grateful to WashU for accepting me and getting me out of that really crappy situation. But I had a really bad attitude about the whole thing, which I kind of regret. I didn't work hard to make too many friends. I'm a very committed Hillary Clinton supporter. I have a Hillary Clinton tattoo. After the election, I was like truly underwater. And I just had a really bad attitude about the whole thing. Was fortunate to be able to transfer, but it was just a really terrible year. And as I kind of reflect on all that, I wish I'd had a better attitude, just made the best of the situation for the year. I think I also kind of blew off some classes I thought were like stupid or why do I need this? One of them was research and writing. And it turns out you really do need that class. And so I definitely had a deficit when I got to WashU. It was just not a good situation. Didn't mean that I didn't enjoy law school because ultimately I did. But, fit is important when you're thinking about a law school, when you're thinking about a job. I definitely wish I'd had more options. I worked really hard on the LSAT, struggled with the LSAT, and, UNC was just the best school I got into. So, yeah.
So going forward into law school, you finally got that big transfer. You moved on
Yes.
to Washington University, but you had those struggles with you. You had, some attitude stuff, and which is totally all right. It's totally understandable. We're all human beings. But what were some things that you did to overcome those things and, move forward and get that good attitude and enjoy law school because first, it's a great time. I don't know that.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, so I started law school thinking I wanted to be a reproductive rights litigator. I wanted to be a trial attorney at Planned Parenthood. While I was at UNC, I was applying for my 1L summer internship, and I knew I wanted that to be probably at the Department of Justice. So I got a pretty fancy 1L summer internship in the Office of Vaccine Litigation at DOJ. It was really the launch pad to future internships and career opportunities. And I really got the trial attorney, got the prosecutor bug, and kind of rethought everything, decided that I wanted to be a homicide prosecutor in the DC US Attorney's Office. So I got to WashU, and I immediately tried to set myself up for a 2L spring semester internship in the US Attorney's Office, which was truly, I cannot say enough good things about the Southern District of Illinois U.S. Attorney's Office. It was an enormously formative experience. I was Rule 711 certified, which students should definitely do if you want to be a prosecutor or a public defender. You can stand up in court and argue, which was fucking amazing. To stand up as a spring 2L and say Aliza Shatzman for the United States was just a really incredible experience. Then spent my 2L summer at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. And the 2L spring internship was technically part of a course through WashU, where I interned part-time and took a little bit of course credit. Got a little bit of course credit, took a little bit of class. And then spent 3L fall full-time at DOJ in the counterterrorism section in Washington, D.C. And that was through the semester in Washington program at WashU. And so I really, use the connections I was building and the relationships I was building to kind of like grow the resume through there. You know, a lot of law schools, I mean, this is not unique to WashU, are just not set up for a lot of public interest focused students. You want to go to big law, they got you covered. You want to be a prosecutor, a public defender, a staff attorney at a nonprofit, you're pretty much on your own to, you know, seek out those opportunities. But I was fortunate to have, of course, WashU, which is a good school on my resume, and as a launch pad, I used it. So, yeah.
So in terms of law schools setting up for those sorts of sectors of the law, but not setting you up, or not exactly not setting you up, but maybe not having as many options, how did you sort of seek out those options to find those opportunities for public interest laws and things such as that?
It's a good question. You really need to be focused on your own job search. And you can't think of your 1L summer as a throwaway summer, because it's not, because your 1L internship will set you up for your 2L internship. And you should not just think of 2 summers as your 2 opportunities to intern. You have semesters, you have fall and spring, either part-time or full-time. So you have a lot of opportunities to build your resume. So the Department of Justice has a whole bunch of internship opportunities on the website. I just kind of went through them and started applying. And as I built, you know, relationships and connections, I was able to rely on those as well as I was applying for my next job. I wanted to get a breadth of criminal law experience. And so I tried to look for things that were within DOJ, but different from each other. But I was very career focused and very, you know, focused on my own success. I think that students who, you know, they shouldn't rely on career services as much as they do. There is a lot of criticism of career services, some of it definitely warranted, but it's not like you should go in thinking career services is going to get you a job. They're not. They may help you like cultivate your resume or create a list of opportunities, but it's ultimately on you to, you know, seek them out. So, which is why it's good to come in with some like work experience before law school, because then you're like, I want to work in government. Here are the opportunities. I probably don't want to work in big law, so I'm not even going to do OCI. Like, yeah.
I think that's so important. It just furthers that message. It's so important to take that initiative, because the career services aren't going to save you at the end of the day. Only you could save yourself, which is just so amazing. But I have to ask, as I always ask everyone, such an important theme on this podcast is finding out what you do want to do, because that's really fun. That's great. But also finding out what you don't want to do. And clearly, you had sort of figured that out a little bit before law school, not wanting to go to big law and sort of having this focus on public interest. I know you said before that you wanted to do reproductive rights, but that seemingly sort of changed a little bit over time. Were there any specific instances or experiences that you had where you sort of figured out, this is what I don't want to do, and then some experiences where you figured out, oh, public interest is what is for me. This is what I want to pursue?
So by the time I started law school, I already knew that I was not going to work at a law firm. I was not going to pursue big law or any kind of law firm work. I'm just not that kind of person. I've never like, you know, made myself small to fit someone's expectations. I'm a very outspoken and assertive person. And it was already pretty clear that I wanted to do some kind of advocacy or activisty type work. I think the shift from reproductive rights litigation to like criminal prosecution happened during that 1L summer at DOJ. The Office of Vaccine Litigation kind of straddles public health, you know, health law and criminal law. And I got to watch some attorneys moot some arguments, and I got to go to court with them. And I think I really wanted to be in court. The thing about reproductive rights litigation, for better or for worse, is while they do have trial attorneys doing that work, they are rarely in court. You don't really want to be in court. A lot of you doing some motions practice, but you're mostly filing things. And I knew that I wanted to be in court on my feet a lot. So the 2L spring in the U.S. Attorney's Office is what really solidified for me. I want to be a prosecutor in court every day, standing up, saying I represent the United States. And really just, I mean, being Rule 711 certified, it's different for every state, but you can, as a 2L, get certified to stand up in court. And if you want to be like a prosecutor or PD, you should 110% do it. It's awesome. You get to like have actual clients, whether it's, you know, your PD clients or the United States. It's just a fantastic experience. So it was really formative work. And I'm fortunate that all my internships really gave me substantive work. And like now I hire interns, both undergrads and law students, and I try to make sure the internship is formative for them because mine were so formative for me.
So I have to ask about just the visceral experience of
Okay.
standing up and saying that you represent the United States or that you represent this client as a public defender. How does that make you feel? I just have to ask.
Oh, it was such a thrill. It was such a thrill. So I got to do one argument in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and it was a supervised release revocation. So a defendant was getting his supervised release revoked. He went back to prison for 10 years. So I presented like a 5 to 10 minute argument. Then I answered questions from the judge. And when he accepted my recommendation, it was just such a thrill. It was like 27, 26-year-old me just like interfacing with this federal judge. It was just a really amazing experience. I don't discount big law or law firm work. And now my nonprofit has 2 wonderful big law firms representing us for all manner of things, and they're wonderful. But if you really want to have an impact, you should really consider public interest work. That is where you're going to go to sleep and wake up every day really galvanized to make the world a better place. I know that law firms let you do some pro bono, but that's really not a big aspect of your work. And so, it kind of makes me sad to see all these very activisty undergrads and law students very involved in stuff on campus, and they just go to big law, and it kind of bums me out. It's like, maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they shouldn't say, I'm going to take 5 years in big law and pay off my loans. It's 5 years of your life wasted. My public interest law soapbox here.
No. I love what you're saying. It is your personal opinion. At the end of the day, it's how you feel, and that's what I'm here to find out, how you feel about things. And now you were a law clerk at the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. Now, can you talk about that experience? How was it? And did it have in any way have an influence on what you eventually would do, become the president and founder of the Legal Accountability Project?
I think did it have an influence is the biggest understatement of the world. So this is a legal podcast. I'm sure that nearly all of your listeners, by the time they hear this, already know my whole clerkship experience, which was very negative and very traumatic. I was discriminated against, harassed, bullied, fired during the pandemic, ultimately retaliated against by the now former judge. It was a really traumatic experience. And I also later found out as I was going through the judicial complaint process that my law school, WashU Law, those wonderful people, knew that the judge who harassed me had harassed other clerks, and they'd opted to withhold this information from me when I was applying for clerkships because they wanted another student to clerk. Now, of course, WashU hates me airing their dirty laundry. That doesn't make it any less important because my work now is about encouraging every law school to do better. So I had this terrible clerkship experience, was fired during the pandemic, took me a year to get back on my feet, started working my dream job in the DC U.S. Attorney's Office when the judge gave me a negative reference and the U.S. Attorney's Office, revoked my job offer and denied me a security clearance. Big deal. I filed a judicial complaint and hired attorneys, participated in the investigation into the now former judge. During that time, in July 2021, I was going through the judicial complaint process in Washington, D.C., and I found out that law clerks are exempt from Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. There are currently 31,000 judiciary employees and more than 1,700 federal judges are exempt from Title VII. Folks like me cannot sue our harassers and seek damages. That is truly outrageous. So I started talking to congressional offices about this problem, and they had just introduced legislation called the Judiciary Accountability Act, which would finally extend Title VII to the federal judiciary. It's very important legislation. I eventually provided congressional testimony in March 2022 in support of that legislation. You can Google it. That is a summary of my experience. And I launched a nonprofit pretty soon after, as I mentioned, to correct injustices I experienced as a law student and a law clerk, including a lack of transparency in clerkship hiring, a lack of diversity and equity in clerkships and the judiciary, an outrageous lack of accountability for judges who mistreat their clerks. And a lot of my work is centered around law schools, who I believe have long received a free pass in the conversation about judicial accountability. Anybody who goes or went to a law school knows that they are very focused on funneling as many students as possible into judicial clerkships, often with little regard for the work environment or the quality of the experience. Law schools are benefiting publicly and in their rankings by their judicial clerkship numbers, and it's about refocusing and recentering the importance of the work environment for students, clerks, and the judiciary generally.
So would you describe that as sort of judicial accountability? If I would want you to sort of go on the tangent here and sort of describe what judicial accountability means to you,
Oh, I love this. Yeah.
and how we could sort of move in a direction to ensure that there's more judicial accountability.
Yes. So judicial accountability is a focus of LAP's work. You know, I use the word accountability a lot, and I think it's important to talk about what that means and what that means to me. I wanted to be a prosecutor because I wanted to hold the bad guys accountable, and I wanted to hold the powerful accountable. What does accountability mean to me? Punishment. It is punishment for judges who harass their clerks, who engage in a variety of misconduct. Now, in a larger sense, there really is a lack of accountability for both federal and state judges, though the processes are a little bit different. Federal judiciary exempt from Title VII. Law clerks cannot sue and seek damages. But even in a state court system where some laws do apply, law clerks are rarely empowered to file a judicial complaint, let alone file suit against their powerful bosses, considering the enormous power disparity between a fresh out of law school clerk and a judge, one of the most powerful members of our profession. And as my experience so rawly illustrates, judges have enormous power over their former clerks' lives, careers, and reputations. So accountability means a couple things. It is our transparency and legal tech platform, our clerkships database, which I will talk about, and really finally making transparent the unnecessarily opaque and secretive clerkship work environment and judicial chambers. So it's about sharing information, but it's also about accountability by encouraging law clerks to file judicial complaints under the Judicial Conduct and Disability Act in the federal system. There are state court systems and state court processes too, so that judges are investigated and reprimanded for misconduct. And it is about punishment. And the judiciary has been loath to investigate or discipline anyone, and they have been unwilling at all to punish any judges. In the rare instances, for example, there is a Second Circuit judge named Sarah Merriam. She was recently, quote unquote, disciplined for an overly harsh work environment. We only know her name because David Latz, a pretty prominent attorney and now a journalist, like unmasked her. Because the federal judiciary, even when they issue a judicial misconduct order, they redact the name of the judge, meaning there's no discipline, no accountability, and nobody can say, well, I want to work in the Second Circuit, but let me at least avoid the judge who harasses people. Judges, because there are many judges who harass people. So it is about real punishment. And some of the things I think are important, mandatory training. Now, right now, judges can agree to voluntarily undergo counseling, but I mean, voluntary means the good ones, the ones who are already doing the right thing and want to do even better, will take the training, and the bad ones will be like, screw this. Reassigning judges cases so they can handle no new cases until they've gone through their training. Reassigning their clerks. You can't have clerks until you go through your training. oversight from a circuit executive or a director of workplace relations who's checking in with the clerks to make sure all is well. A public disciplinary order where judges are reprimanded by name so everybody knows. And judges can only be removed by congressional impeachment, which, never happens. I think that's a tool we should use. So that's kind of what accountability means to me. Now, I take a much stronger stance than probably anybody on this. It's good to have a spectrum, even on the Legal Accountability Project's board, even among like the people who support our work and our many, many supporters. There are a breadth of opinions, but somebody needs to be saying, somebody needs to be making the strongest statement in favor of accountability for our judiciary. I remember when the now former judge who mistreated me, he was removed from the bench for other reasons besides mistreating his clerks. There was some other stuff going on with him. And somebody said to me, Aliza, I know what happened to you was terrible, but it's really sad that we're losing a progressive sentencer. In Washington, D.C., there are no other progressive attorneys we could ever appoint to the D.C. bench, God forbid. Like, this is how the legal profession treats judges. Like, there is no backup plan for anybody who harasses people. And like part of it is the Senate. It's the Senate Government Relations Committee for DC judges. They are unique. And then, of course, the Senate Judiciary Committee for federal judges. They move really slowly in their nominations processes, and that's part of the problem. They're getting really stopped up. There are a lot of vacancies. We got to fill them. But anybody who treats a judge as if there is nobody who could ever replace them is just insane at this point. And we just, prior to my work, prior to the Legal Accountability Project's work, nobody was talking about this. We have sparked a national conversation around judicial accountability, around judicial clerkships. They are not an unadulterated good. Many are overall positive experiences, but are very nuanced. Many more are bad or terrible like mine, or even worse. And those are just never discussed. Everybody is so fearful. They are silenced by powerful members of the legal profession who would like to put their blinders on and pretend that because people aren't speaking out, it's not happening. But I got news for them. Not all experiences are positive, and law clerks are increasingly galvanized to share their experience. And I predict that over the next year or two, it's going to be a watershed moment of the clerks who are empowered to share their experiences with LAP, not stopping there. They're talking to reporters and the press. They'll probably be talking to Congress. I think we're going to see some big things in the federal judiciary. And it's time for everybody to buckle up, and for the bad ones to, really buckle up, because somebody's coming for them.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be honest. I've never heard of any of this stuff. Like, this is completely new news to me.
Told you I was gonna blow your mind on this podcast.
No, I mean, you absolutely have. I think it's fascinating, to say the least. And I think what's so fascinating about it is the fact that the law clerks are sort of put in this dynamic where they can't really do a lot, because like in your own situation, when he gave you the negative report and they got it taken away, if you were to ever come out against him publicly and say something about him, if someone else were to do that, the judge can take another job away. And I think something like that, just something as small as that, have such impacts on especially law clerks who don't really have that much power or influence or any sort of experience that they can build upon to sort of have some foundations where it'd be like, oh, well, he said this, here's a negative report, and they can't really do anything about that. So I'm utterly fascinated by it all, and I think it's a great segue. Oh, but go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I wanted to say, there are unfortunately far too many law clerks who are mistreated in chambers, bullied, harassed, discriminated against, and the legal profession and law schools want to message those as challenging, in quotes, but worth it for the prestige. And the stuff is all really bad and really traumatic. But law clerks are silenced because they fear that what happened to me will happen to them. There is no legal protection for law clerks against retaliation. There is no cultural protection. Judges are given such enormous deference to give these references. They are not questioned. And that is the problem. They exert so much power over their former clerks' lives, careers, and reputations. I encountered clerks who worked for judges who are now dead, who are still fearful of speaking out because of their network of powerful former clerks. The fear and the power imbalance just is so enormous. And it is on legal employers and the legal profession to interrogate a negative reference. Because if you're looking at an application like mine, where everything checks out, everything's ducks in a row, and there's this one crazy negative reference, maybe that says something about the judge and not the applicant. And maybe you should at least check in with everybody, or disregard the negative reference. What I say to a lot of clerks and judges is that a negative reference like that or mistreatment really often says nothing about you, the clerk, and says everything about the judge. And I hope that when people hear me share my experience, they're empowered to speak out and stand up for themselves and not just fearful that what happened to me will happen to them. The federal judiciary and state judiciaries too seem very unwilling when I speak to them, or sometimes we're speaking at each other, which is hard, but they seem unwilling to believe that retaliation happens. I think we have level set that mistreatment does happen. It's bad. Whether they're willing to solve it, query. The retaliation piece, they're just not willing to go there. But clerks are fired and retaliated against often, and I just wish more of them would speak out. I mean, we've encountered judicial chambers where the whole chambers, the clerks and the judicial assistant just quit. And I'll talk to a circuit executive or a DWR, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know about that." Or like, "That doesn't raise a red flag." All the employees quit, and that doesn't raise a red flag. Like, what are you doing? That is your whole job. It is really bad. It's a really bad system. It doesn't mean it can't be fixed, because it certainly can. And I'm still an advocate for judicial clerkships. Many are like wonderful experiences, but it's about raising the bar on workplace civility generally, raising the expectations for every single judge. We give you life tenure, a high salary, all this power in a row, but it's not like go do whatever the hell you want. Like there should be guardrails and expectations.
Yeah, I because it kind of bums me out too, because a lot of people always come on here and they always talk about how impactful their judicial clerkships are and how much influential they were for the rest of their career. So to hear that people are not having those experiences more often than not, but I think, like you said, the system itself sort of incentivizes the fact that you shouldn't say anything, because if you do, there will be punishment. Whereas it incentivizes, is that a word? De-incentivize, I guess.
Disincentivizes, yeah.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. But disincentivizes you to actually speak out and say something, because it can come back, and like you said, like some people are still dead and they still feel haunted by those people.
So I do want to say something about, and this is happening less now, but about people talking about their wonderful formative clerkship experiences. Some of those people are not being fully truthful. And I think that's a problem. And I have talked to people who've done that about that. And I think they do feel bad, or at least conflicted. And they certainly feel bad when prospective clerks reach out wanting information, but they're also very fearful. And I kind of think of the several clerkship cycles before and since I launched the nonprofit. The couple after I was fired and before we launched, it was very toxic. The conversation on Twitter and LinkedIn in June around clerkship hiring for the federal system, which happens on OSCAR, the online system for clerkship application review. Plan opens in June. Lots of people applying for clerkships. It used to be that people every single year would expound on their lifelong mentor-mentee relationships with their judges, referring to them fondly as my judge. Decades later, my judge officiated my wedding, blah, blah, blah. This cycle, this past June, we saw very little of that bullshit, and that was great. And I think we've really even changed the social media and the public conversation around clerking. If you had a great clerkship experience, it's wonderful for you to share that, but you must recognize that not everyone's experience is like yours. Probably not even everybody's experience for the judge you clerked for is like yours. And you're really making clerks who had a negative experience feel alone. like they are the only ones, like they should stay silent because they must have done something wrong because everybody else's experience was wonderful. And the Legal Accountability Project Law School programming, we've done like 50 events over the past 2 years. For so many students, is the first time anybody's ever talked about a negative clerkship experience in their presence. There is a range of clerkship experiences, just like there is a range of job experiences generally. But clerkships are like this third rail of the legal profession where you're not supposed to say anything negative about them. And I have a real problem with people who are kind of whitewashing their own experience.
Absolutely. So I'd like to go into the founding and Miss President, here we have her with us, of the Legal Accountability Project in 2022. You had started it, you had founded it. So can you talk about what went into founding it and how you got the wheels going?
Yeah, so we launched in June 2022, intentionally around law clerk hiring, which happens in June. It was a couple months after I'd provided congressional testimony. And in the weeks following my testimony, I'd already begun to think about ways to further my advocacy work on behalf of clerks. So I started having these initial conversations with a couple dozen law school clerkship directors, deans of career services, law school deans, to talk about the resources they use to help students identify a good clerkship experience, to help them avoid judges who mistreat their clerks. A handful of the top law schools do this post-clerkship survey sent to law clerks at the end of their clerkships, asking them about the experience. Some have tried to make those accessible to students in a searchable internal database, accessible to all students. Only a handful of law schools do them. I remember speaking with the now former dean of WashU Law, and I suggested this to him, and he basically blew me off. And here we are a couple years later, and he's still blowing me off. And so there's a couple things that I saw law schools do: this post-clerkship survey, a database, a historical list of all the alums who've clerked and who they clerked for in their emails, clerkship advising, programming. Now, unfortunately, these post-clerkship surveys that law schools maintain are just uniformly positive, because they are sending the message that if you had a negative experience, don't put it in writing. We don't want to know about it. Also, anybody with alumni login credentials could log into those databases. You're a judge, you have alumni login credentials you can log into, and judges seeing reviews about them chills the candor of responses. So I was having all these background conversations, and I launched a nonprofit kind of as a vector for my advocacy work. We did not want to be just an advocacy organization. And some organizations, I mean, they do a lot of tweeting, they do a lot of public messaging. Of course, social media is important, but that couldn't be all we did. I continue to advocate for legislative change, but that was going to be an uphill battle. So we began to conceptualize pretty soon after we launched this centralized clerkships database, a legal tech and transparency platform that democratizes judicial clerkship information. At this point, we're a repository of over 1,100 candid post-clerkship surveys, about over 850 federal and state judges. We are the largest independent repository of clerkship information in the US. Our database is twice the size of top law schools' databases, and we know exactly what they do and do not have. We are the best opportunity in a generation to make real and lasting change in the court. In weeks following my congressional testimony, I began to think about some ideas to further my advocacy work on behalf of law clerks. So I began having a couple dozen conversations with law school clerkship directors, deans of career services, law school deans about the resources they use to help students identify a beneficial clerkship experience and avoid judges who mistreat their clerks. I found out that some schools, the most well-resourced and the highest ranked ones, do a post-clerkship survey, so ask law clerks about their experience. Some try to centralize those in an internal searchable database accessible to students. Unfortunately, those surveys are uniformly positive, making them basically useless for anyone seeking candid information about judges. because the messaging is really, if you had a negative experience, don't put it in writing. We don't want to know. And because anyone with alumni login credentials can log in, judges can also look at the surveys, and that kind of chills the candor of responses. Some law schools maintain historical lists of law clerk alumni and who they clerked for and their email addresses. Some do none of these things. My law school, WashU Law, does none of these. I met with the then law school dean to suggest all this stuff, and he blew me off then, and he's blown me off ever since then with these kind of suggestions. So I knew that some law schools were doing these kind of internal surveys and databases. And even, giving law schools every single benefit of the doubt, no law school knows about all the federal and state judges students will apply to. New judges are appointed and elected each year. They have pipelines and relationships with certain judges. And law schools are constrained in their information by who alums have clerked for in the past, and they're willing to share information. So knowing all this, I was already engaging in some legal scholarship around clerkship resources and judicial accountability. We launched a nonprofit in June 2022 in conjunction with law clerk hiring that year. We did not want to just be an advocacy organization. I mean, there's some organizations that do a lot of tweeting, which is important, but it shouldn't be the only thing you do. We wanted to offer concrete solutions. And while LAP was definitely a vector for my legislative advocacy work, that was going to be an uphill battle too. So we launched a nonprofit. We immediately identified law schools as key stakeholders who've historically received a free pass in conversations about judicial accountability. So we conceptualized and started talking about this clerkships database, a legal tech initiative to democratize judicial clerkship information. We're the largest independent repository of clerkship info in the US. We have over 1,100 candid post-clerkship surveys, about 850 federal and state judges. We have more information than any law school has. And we've been on this law school roadshow for the past 2 years, doing like 50 law school events to kind of galvanize student support, meet with administrations, and change the conversation around clerking. So this clerkships database, which we launched for the first cohort of student users in April 2024, is an important aspect of what we do, though it's certainly not the only thing we do. We already have 1,000 users in the first year, and we're excited to onboard more users, more law schools in the coming months and years. So we really are the positive change in the judiciary. Anybody who's talking about clerkships is talking about the Legal Accountability Project, and I'm very proud of that. But there's a lot more work to do. And I'm still a proponent of clerking, but it's about being mindful about who you clerk for in a way law students historically could not be due to the opacity and the secrecy of clerkship work environments. Now they can be informed and discerning consumers of clerkship opportunities, and that's important. And it's good to be, a platform for facilitating student clerkships, but we have to be talking about the accountability piece too, and ensuring every judge is a good manager and a good mentor, and that the bad ones are held accountable for their poor conduct.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, The Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablaster.com today and enroll in the law school operating system. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. Now, back to the show.
I mean, like I said before and like I said again, I didn't know about any of this, and it is continually mind-blowing as you talk about it. I think what you have here at the Legal Accountability Project is just absolutely wonderful, and it's something that can make a real impact on the legal field. It already is. It already has. Already has 1,000 users already, which is just fantastic in 1 year. Those are numbers to be proud of. Absolutely. But we're down to our last 5 questions. You know this, like you said, you're an enthusiastic listener. So you're anticipating these last 5 questions. And as always, the first of the 5 questions. Did I just forget the first of the 5 questions? What is the first of the 5 questions?
Oh, I don't remember. I'm still thrown from my internet going down for the first time ever.
Now, the people didn't get to see that. But
no, it's been an eventful podcast recording, guys.
It absolutely has. I'm forgetting the first of 5 questions. We're just skip to number 4. If I remember 5, I remember it. But
okay.
Number 4 is the book recommendations live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast. Doesn't have to be about the legal field. Just some of your favorite books, something you give a gift to someone.
Jodi Kantor's She Said about the Me Too movement is a great book. Gretchen Carlson's books are great. One of them is called Be Fierce. I think it's a great book. And anything and everything that Hillary Clinton has written.
And I remembered the first of the 5 questions. Do not worry.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. It's actually, I can't believe I forgot. But it's actually perfect for you because you are working on a legal tech platform. And I always love talking about legal tech.
Yeah.
So it is the tech stack question per se. What does it look like? And what are some recommendations do you have for people?
So I have my laptop, which is the mothership. And it's funny because I had to take my computer to the Apple store for surgery last weekend. I was sans computer for 3 days. I was losing my fucking mind. You can do stuff on your phone, but you can't do all the stuff. So it's my laptop and my iPhone. It's where I do a lot of my work. I run a tech platform, but fortunately we have engineers who build and advise because I'm not the most tech savvy lawyer. So, I have the basics, use the basics. Yep. I actually still have an iPod that is dying, but I imagine some of your listeners don't even know what the fucking iPod is.
Well, I mean, I know what the iPod is. I remember the commercial with the
dancing
the shadows, the
Yeah.
dancing shadows. It was always my favorite commercial. It'd get me dancing. I was like 5 years old, loving it. But third to last question here: what are the types of things that you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis? Either that be through social media, so Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube, Facebook, Substack, any podcasts you listen to that you have recommendations for people, any people on LinkedIn that you recommend for people. What is crossing the transom of Aliza's mind on a daily basis?
So I am an avid and aggressive social media user and consumer because it's important for LAP's work. So I am basically glued to LinkedIn and Twitter. We have like Instagram and Facebook accounts and everything else and a YouTube account, but it's really the LinkedIn and Twitter accounts that are important. Trying to think what else. Okay, so I'm an aspiring dog owner. My parents have big fluffy hunting dogs. They're called Spinonis. And so I'm in all of the Spinoni owner Facebook groups, kind of constantly scrolling through dog pictures. I listen to a lot of podcasts. David Latt's Original Jurisdiction is excellent. Jonah Perlin's How I Lawyer is also excellent. Your podcast is great. I'm the one downloading all the old episodes. I love legal podcasts that like interview people about their careers. I think it's always super interesting. But I'm a big podcast consumer. Somewhat of a news consumer. But the judicial accountability, clerkship stuff keeps me pretty busy. So, yeah.
It's always crazy to me that someone like you are out there just listening to me all the time. It's a little crazy. It's a little crazy, I have to say, actually hearing that. But it's all right. I hope you enjoy my voice. Some people don't. But
I was wondering what you'd be like because you're very enthusiastic on the podcast, and I was wondering what he'd look like IRL. So,
am I as enthusiastic as I am on a typical episode?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
fantastic. Good. I set the standard. I set the bar high because I got to continue to reach it. The second to last question here.
Well, the pre-podcast enthusiasm is also notable too. I was not, it's not expecting you to go through every sponsor ever, and like, I'm kidding.
I love giving people the whole spiel. I got to give them the whole background. Give the full transparency, the whole Nate Crespo experience. It's important for everyone to experience it. But second to last question here. You got the legal accountability project. It's taking up a lot of your time. But what does an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for, Aliza?
Good question. So my work life is, busy and chaotic, and I, of course, have to be on a lot, and I'm always around people. So my personal life is pretty quiet. I mean, it's just me right now, though I said aspiring dog owner. I want all the canine friends. So, Friday nights, I'm at home, listening to podcasts, watching TV, like reruns of like Friends or older shows like that. Sunday morning, I'm up early, typically working. I'll be in the clerkships database, reviewing submissions and making sure everything is properly uploaded. So I'm typically working. I like to take a lot of walks outside and work out and stuff like that. But I try to keep it pretty chill because work is busy. I am what Hillary Clinton has referred to as an extroverted introvert. So I like being around people. That's good. That's fun. But I draw strength and recharge from being by myself. So by myself time is good too.
Of course, we all need our by ourselves time. But last question here. You know what it is? It is the words of wisdom. I do it at the end of every episode. So what is your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the legal professionals out there in the world?
The legal profession is very risk averse. And I didn't realize that, when I was a law student. If you have a great idea or you see an unmet need, like take the fucking leap. Just do it. Just like start your business, start your venture, just do it. Because probably other people have had the idea and said, oh, it can't be done or it shouldn't be done or I'm not the right person at the right time. Like, I am evidence that one person can just like fill a void, see an unmet need, and create like incredible change. I mean, just do it. There's never going to be a right time. You are the right person, and the time is now.
I love it. I love it so much. It is beautifully said because there is no.
Despite the expletives.
Listen. The colorful language is always welcomed on this podcast. But thank you so much for doing this, Aliza. I appreciate you telling your experiences, the raw experiences, and the wisdom that you have. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com. That's Lawyers in the Making, one word, one single word, .substack.com. And I will see you all in the next one.